I looked at the judge and placed my hand on the Bible. Your Honor, on March 15th at 3:47 p.m., Madison said exactly, "The old bitch will never figure it out. We'll have her declared incompetent by Christmas." The defense attorney jumped up. "Objection. No one has that kind of memory." I smiled. "I have a photographic memory. 35 years of teaching special needs children trained me to remember every word, every detail, every conversation." I pulled out a small recording device. "And I've been recording everything for 6 months." The way Madison's face went white, let me tell you exactly how we got to this moment. I was changing 18-month-old Mason's diaper while managing 4 other grandchildren when Madison burst through my front door. "Grandma Rose, amazing news!" She was glowing, phone already out for the perfect selfie. I looked up from the chaos. 5 children, ages 18 months to 9 years, had been living at my house 11 hours a day for 3 years. I was exhausted, broke, and 72 years old. "We're pregnant with baby number 6. Something didn't feel right. After 35 years working with children, I could spot when someone was lying. Madison wasn't showing any real pregnancy symptoms I'd seen thousands of times. "Madison, when did you find out?" "Yesterday. David is so excited. We're thinking of doing a gender reveal party. You'll watch all the kids while we plan it, right?" But I was studying her body language, her voice patterns, her micro-expressions. Skills I'd developed from decades of working with children who couldn't always communicate their needs verbally. Madison was performing, every gesture calculated for maximum impact. "Of course I'll help," I said, watching her face carefully. Relief, not joy. Relief that I'd agreed to more free labor. As she left to share the news, I noticed her purse had fallen open. Inside were medication bottles, not prenatal vitamins, fertility drugs, ovulation stimulators, hormone injections. Madison wasn't pregnant. She was desperately trying to get pregnant while expecting me to raise 6 children. But why the performance? Why the elaborate announcement? That's when I remembered her social media posts. Baby announcements got massive engagement. Pregnancy content was her most profitable. Madison was monetizing a fake pregnancy while planning to dump another real baby on me. That's when I decided to start recording everything. Because if she was lying about this, what else was she lying about? That night, I pulled out equipment I'd used for recording student progress assessments. Tiny digital recorders I'd hidden around my house. If Madison was lying about being pregnant, what else was she lying about? I didn't have to wait long. The next evening, Madison was on her phone in my kitchen while I bathed the children. She thought I couldn't hear her. "David, phase 2 is working perfectly. She's so exhausted that we can start the incompetency claims. Dr. Wilson will testify she's showing dementia signs." My blood went cold, but my teacher training kicked in. Document everything. Remember everything. I developed a photographic memory from decades of tracking dozens of children's progress simultaneously. I memorized every word. March 15th, 3:47 p.m. Madison to David. "The old bitch will never figure it out. We'll have her declared incompetent by Christmas. Then we'll have power of attorney and access to her retirement accounts." The cold calculation in her voice chilled me. This wasn't desperation or overwhelm. This was predatory planning. "What about the kids?" David's voice through the phone. "We'll put them in state care once we get her money. I'm not actually raising 6 kids, David. This was always temporary." "And if she fights the incompetency claim?" "David, she's 72 and taking medication that makes her confused. Who's going to believe her over 2 concerned family members and a doctor's report?" I stood frozen, listening to my son and daughter-in-law discuss disposing of me and my grandchildren like we were obstacles to their wealth. "How much are we talking about total?" "Her retirement accounts, the house, the trust fund?" "Probably close to 3 million. Maybe more if we can access her late husband's veteran benefits." They'd calculated my worth down to the penny. What if someone suspects? David, who's going to suspect? I'm the perfect daughter-in-law. Social media proves I love spending time with the kids and helping Rose. Everyone thinks I'm a saint. I stood in my bathroom doorway, 4-year-old Emma in my arms, and realized my son and daughter-in-law weren't just using me. They were planning to destroy me systematically, legally and publicly, while everyone applauded them for their dedication to family. The recordings got worse. March 18th, 2:15 p.m. Madison to unknown caller. Yeah, I've been giving her extra medication to make her seem confused. Nothing dangerous, just enough to support the dementia claims. I looked at the pills Madison had been bringing me. For your blood pressure, Rose. Doctor's orders. I'd been taking them faithfully for months, but I'd never had blood pressure problems. March 22nd, 4:15 p.m. Madison to David. She'll never check the trust fund. By the time she realizes the $2.3 million is gone, we'll have her declared incompetent. Trust fund. I'd set up a $3 million educational trust for my grandchildren using my late husband's life insurance. Only I had access to it, or so I thought. I checked the account online that night, my hands shaking as I entered my login information. Account balance, $0. Zero. Every penny gone, transferred out over the past 6 months in increments designed to avoid detection. But the transfer authorizations showed my electronic signature. Perfect forgeries that any bank would accept as legitimate. Madison hadn't just stolen from me. She'd been studying my signature, my banking patterns, my security questions for months. This wasn't impulsive theft. This was sophisticated financial fraud. I dug deeper into the account history. The money hadn't just disappeared. It had been systematically laundered through shell companies, cryptocurrency exchanges, and offshore accounts. Madison had created an entire financial infrastructure to hide my stolen money. But they didn't know I was recording everything. They didn't know about my photographic memory. And they definitely didn't know that I'd been pretending to take those pills while actually building up an immunity. Because if 35 years of teaching special needs children taught me anything, it's that you document everything, you trust no one until you have proof, and you never underestimate what people will do for money. I had 6 months of proof, and I was about to use every bit of professional expertise I'd ever developed to destroy them. 3 weeks later, I had 47 recorded conversations, 63 pieces of evidence, and photographic recall of every crime they'd committed. Madison thought I was getting more confused. David thought the medication was working. They had no idea I was building the most comprehensive case of elder abuse and fraud ever documented. Every night after the children left, I'd write down exactly what I'd heard and seen, word for word, with precise timestamps. March 25th, 11:43 a.m. Madison to her mother, Linda. Rose is perfect, old, gullible, and she has money. David's inheritance will set us up for life, plus she's basically raising our kids for free. March 30th, 6:22 p.m. David to Madison. Mom asked about the trust fund yesterday. I told her she must be confused, that there never was one. April 2nd, 1:15 p.m. Madison to unknown caller. We're drugging the kids too. Just mild sedatives so they're calmer for my videos. Rose thinks they're vitamins. That last one made me physically sick. I started examining everything Madison gave the children. Gummy vitamins that were actually mild sedatives. She was drugging 5 children to make them easier to manage for her social media content. My teacher training recognized the signs immediately. Delayed reactions, unusual drowsiness, difficulty concentrating. I'd attributed it to their difficult home life, but now I understood the truth. Madison was systematically drugging 5 innocent children to create better social media content. But the recordings revealed something even more sinister. April 10th, 7:20 p.m. Madison to her manager. The content performs better when the kids look slightly sedated, more angelic, less chaotic. My engagement rates are up 40% since I started the new vitamin regimen. She was monetizing my grandchildren's drugged states. Thousands of followers were unknowingly consuming content of chemically subdued children. The pharmaceutical angle is working too. I can partner with companies that make children's supplements, maybe even ADHD medication brands if we can get Jake diagnosed. Madison was planning to give Jake a false ADHD diagnosis to create more content opportunities and pharmaceutical partnerships. What about the grandmother? Rose? She has no idea. I told her the kid's behavior improved because I found better vitamins. She actually thanked me for helping them focus better. I'd been praising Madison for poisoning my grandchildren, but I kept recording, I kept documenting, and I kept pretending to be the confused old woman they thought I was. Because Madison had made one critical error. She'd underestimated exactly how much a special education teacher understands about children's behavior, medication effects, and systematic abuse. She thought she was manipulating a helpless grandmother. She was actually documenting evidence for a professional who'd spent 35 years identifying and reporting child abuse. April 5th, 3:30 p.m. Madison to bank representative. Yes, I have power of attorney for Rose Thompson. She's developed dementia and asked me to manage her accounts. I was listening from the next room while Madison was on a call I wasn't supposed to hear. The Educational Trust Fund? We need to liquidate that for her medical care. Yes, all $2, $3 million. She'd been impersonating me to banks, using forged documents that gave her access to accounts I'd never authorized. April 8th, 7:45 p.m. David to Madison. The lawyer says we need medical documentation of her incompetency before we can access her retirement accounts. That's another $800,000. No problem. Dr. Wilson owes me a favor. He'll say whatever we need him to say. I researched Dr. Wilson that night. He'd lost his medical license 3 years ago for falsifying patient records. They weren't just stealing from me. They were setting up a complete legal framework to have me declared mentally incompetent so they could access every account I had. But here's what they didn't know. I'd been keeping perfect records of my own mental state. Daily cognitive tests, memory exercises, documentation that would prove I was sharper than people half my age. And I'd been secretly testing the medication they'd been giving me. Sedatives. High doses designed to create confusion and memory problems. Madison wasn't just stealing my money. She was systematically destroying my mental faculties to make the theft legal. April 12th, 9:20 a.m. Madison to pharmacy. I need to increase the dosage on Rose Thompson's medication. She's becoming resistant to the current amount. Resistant? Because I'd been pretending to take pills while actually building immunity by taking smaller doses and studying their effects. I had the pills tested at a private lab. Lorazepam, haloperidol, and risperidone. Powerful psychiatric medications that would cause confusion, memory loss, and disorientation in an elderly person. The dosages Madison was giving me were borderline lethal. She wasn't just trying to make me seem incompetent. She was slowly poisoning me to death. April 15th, 2:10 p.m. Madison to David. At these doses, we should see significant cognitive decline within 6 weeks. If not, Dr. Wilson says we can increase them until we get the effect we need. What if she dies? David, she's 72. Old people die all the time. Heart failure from medication interactions. Very common. My own son was discussing my murder like a business transaction, but I had it all recorded. Every word, every timestamp, every piece of evidence that would destroy them both. The worst discovery came on April 18th. Madison to unknown caller. The kids are getting too energetic for the videos. Can you increase the sedative dosage in their vitamins? I need them calm for at least 4 hours during filming. My grandchildren. 5 innocent children being systematically drugged so their mother could create better social media content. I tested their vitamins too. Benadryl, melatonin, and mild benzodiazepines. Not enough to cause permanent damage, but enough to keep them unnaturally calm and compliant. That night, watching 9-year-old Jake struggle to stay awake while doing homework, I made my decision. I was done gathering evidence. It was time to destroy them. Have you ever discovered someone in your family was poisoning you? Share below. This is more common than people think. On April 20th, I confronted Madison with some of my evidence. Not all of it. Just enough to see how she'd react. "Madison, we need to talk." She looked up from her phone where she was editing another perfect mom video. "I know you're not pregnant. I found the fertility drugs in your purse." Her face went white, then immediately shifted to fake tears. "Rose, I can explain. We've been trying for so long, and I didn't want to disappoint you if it didn't work out. The fertility treatments are just to help. I also know about the trust fund, Madison." Complete panic in her eyes now. "What trust fund?" I placed bank statements on the table. "The $2-3 million educational fund for the children. The one you emptied using forged documents." Madison's performance was masterful. Tears, confusion, desperation. "Rose, I think you might be confused. You've been having memory problems lately. Maybe we should talk to your doctor." "I'm not confused, Madison. I remember everything, including your phone conversations about having me declared incompetent." That's when her mask slipped completely. "You've been spying on me?" "I've been protecting myself from you." She stood up, her fake vulnerability replaced by cold calculation. "Rose, nobody will believe you. You're a 72-year-old woman who's been taking medication for dementia. Your memory isn't reliable. Your judgment is compromised." "What medication, Madison?" "The pills I've been giving you, for your blood pressure and anxiety. Doctor's orders." I smiled and pulled out one of the bottles. "You mean these sedatives? The ones you've been using to slowly poison me?" Madison's eyes flashed with something dangerous. For a moment, I saw the real person behind the perfect daughter-in-law mask. "You don't understand what you're dealing with, Rose. I've worked too hard for this to let some senile old woman ruin everything." "I understand perfectly. You're a sociopath who's been systematically abusing vulnerable people for money." She laughed. "Prove it. Go ahead. Call the police. Tell them your confused story about recordings and conspiracies. See who they believe. A concerned daughter-in-law worried about her mother-in-law's declining mental health, or a paranoid elderly woman making wild accusations. I've been planning this for 3 years, Rose. Every doctor's visit, every medication adjustment, every confused moment you've had, it's all documented as evidence of your deteriorating condition." The confidence in her voice was chilling. She'd created an entire false medical history to support her fraud. Madison's face went through several emotions before settling on desperate bargaining. "Okay, yes, I made some mistakes. I was overwhelmed, scared about money, worried about the kids, but I never meant to hurt you. You stole $2-3 million from your own children. I can return it. It was just a loan. I was going to pay it back once David got his promotion." I let her talk. Let her think she was convincing me. "And the medication?" "I thought you seemed anxious. I was just trying to help you feel calmer. I didn't realize the dosage was wrong." Lie after lie, but I kept my expression neutral. "What about the children's vitamins?" Madison's eyes darted away. "What about them?" "The sedatives you've been giving them for your videos." "Rose, I think you're confused again. The kids take regular vitamins. You might be imagining—" "Madison, I had them tested." Complete silence. Then she collapsed into the chair, sobbing. "I'm so sorry. I didn't mean for it to go this far. I was just so overwhelmed with 5 kids, and the social media money was helping, and David's job isn't enough." For a moment, I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. "I'll fix everything," she promised. "I'll return the money, stop the medications, get proper help for the kids. Just please don't involve the police." I looked at my daughter-in-law, young, desperate, and still lying about everything. Okay, Madison, one chance to make this right. She hugged me, tears streaming down her face. Thank you, Rose. You won't regret this. But I was still recording everything. That evening, Madison thought I was asleep when she made her phone call. David, she knows everything. About the money, the medications, all of it. What did you tell her? I bought us time. Convinced her I'd fix everything. But we need to accelerate the plan. The commitment papers? Dr. Wilson has them ready. We just need to make her disappear for a few weeks until the guardianship goes through. My blood went cold. What about the recording equipment she mentioned? I'll find it and destroy it. She's old, David. How sophisticated could her surveillance be? They were planning to have me involuntarily committed to a psychiatric facility while they gained legal control of my remaining assets. But they'd made one critical mistake. They thought I was just a confused old woman with basic recording equipment. They had no idea who they were really dealing with. When someone tries to have you committed against your will, what would you do? The system is scarier than you think. The next morning, my son David arrived with a man in a white coat. Mom, this is Dr. Peterson. We're concerned about your recent behavior. I recognized Dr. Peterson immediately. Marcus Webb, Madison's cousin, who'd been arrested for medical fraud in 2019. I'd researched him weeks ago. Mrs. Thompson, your family has reported some concerning symptoms: memory loss, paranoid thinking, accusations against family members. I played my part perfectly. I'm fine, David. Just tired from watching the children so much. Mom, you accused Madison of stealing money that doesn't exist. You think she's been poisoning you. These are serious delusions. My own son, looking me in the eye and lying. David, I found evidence. Mom, there is no evidence. You've been confused lately. Sometimes you forget what day it is. Sometimes you call me by Dad's name. None of that was true, but I realized David had been documenting false symptoms for months. We've arranged for you to stay at a facility where you can get proper care. Dr. Peterson opened his briefcase. Involuntary commitment papers. Just temporary, Mrs. Thompson. Until we can assess your condition properly. That's when I understood the full scope of their plan. David hadn't been enabling Madison's abuse. He'd been orchestrating it. My son had been planning my destruction from the beginning. I've already spoken with the facility, David said, his voice gentle and concerned. They're expecting you this afternoon. David, I don't need a facility. I'm thinking clearly. Mom, yesterday you told Madison that she'd stolen millions of dollars from a trust fund that you never set up. You accused her of drugging you with medication that your doctor prescribed. Dr. Peterson nodded sympathetically. Paranoid delusions about family members are common in early-stage dementia, Mrs. Thompson. I stared at this fake doctor, my fraud son, and realized how perfectly they'd planned this. What about the children? They'll be fine, Mom. Madison is their mother. She can take care of them. But I've been watching them for 3 years. Because you wanted to, because you loved spending time with them. But now that you're unwell, it's not safe for children to be in your care. The commitment papers were already filled out. All they needed was my signature or a court order. I'm not signing anything. David's mask slipped for just a moment. Mom, you don't have a choice. 2 medical professionals have certified that you're a danger to yourself and others. Dr. Peterson pulled out a syringe. This will just help you feel calmer during the transport, Mrs. Thompson. They were going to drug me into compliance and drag me away. That's when I activated my hidden recording device and pressed the emergency alert I'd set up weeks ago. I'm not taking any more of your drugs, I said, backing away from the fake doctor. Mom, you're being paranoid again, David said, moving to block the door. Dr. Peterson advanced with the syringe. Mrs. Thompson, this is for your own good. My own good? Like the sedatives Madison's been giving me for months? Mom, That's exactly what I'm talking about. These delusions. April 15th, 2:10 p.m., I said clearly. Madison to David. At these doses, we should see significant cognitive decline within 6 weeks. David froze. March 30th, 6:22 p.m. David to Madison. I told her she must be confused, that there never was a trust fund. Dr. Peterson looked confused. What is she talking about? I have a photographic memory, I said. 35 years of teaching special needs children. I remember every conversation, every timestamp, every crime you've committed. David lunged for me, but I was ready. I'd been building my strength along with my immunity. 72 years old, but still faster than my 40-year-old son who'd gotten soft from years of desk work. I made it to my neighbor's house and activated my emergency plan. My neighbor Sarah opened her door to find me running from my own son and a fake doctor with a syringe. Call 911, I said, and tell them to bring the recording device I gave you last week. Sarah had been holding evidence for me, backup recordings and documents in case something happened. Rose, what's going on? My family has been trying to murder me for my money, but I have proof of everything. The police arrived in 6 minutes, just in time to hear Madison screaming into her phone. David, she got away. The old bitch actually got away. The officers looked at me, a small elderly woman in a house dress, then at my son and the fake doctor holding a syringe. Ma'am, are you Rose Thompson? Yes. And I have 6 months of evidence that my family has been systematically poisoning me, stealing my money, and planning to have me murdered. I handed them my master recording device. Everything is documented. Has anyone in your family ever tried to have you committed? Share your story. Elder abuse is everywhere. Detective Maria Santos looked at my evidence folder like she'd never seen anything like it. Mrs. Thompson, this is comprehensive. I'd organized 47 recordings, 63 pieces of physical evidence, and a timeline with photographic precision. March 15th, 3:47 p.m. Madison to David. The old bitch will never figure it out. We'll have her declared incompetent by Christmas. I played the recording. Clear audio, perfect quality. March 22nd, 4:15 p.m. Madison to David. She'll never check the trust fund. By the time she realizes the $2.3 million is gone, we'll have her declared incompetent. Detective Santos's eyebrows shot up. $2.3 million? Educational trust fund for my grandchildren, completely emptied through forged documents. April 15th, 2:10 p.m. Madison to David. At these doses, we should see significant cognitive decline within 6 weeks. If not, Dr. Wilson says we can increase them until we get the effect we need. They were poisoning you? I handed her the medication analysis. Psychiatric drugs in doses that should have killed someone my age. I only survived because I'd been building immunity. How? 35 years of teaching special needs children taught me to think systematically. When something seemed wrong, I started documenting everything. Detective Santos shook her head. Mrs. Thompson, I've been investigating elder abuse for 15 years. I've never seen documentation this thorough. There's more. I showed her the recordings of Madison drugging the children, David's fake medical reports about my mental state, and Dr. Peterson's real identity. Marcus Webb, Madison's cousin, arrested for medical fraud in 2019, currently on probation. And you remembered all of this? Photographic memory. Occupational necessity when you're tracking the progress of dozens of children with different learning disabilities. Detective Santos called for backup. What happened next was like watching dominoes fall. Madison was arrested at her house while live streaming a family update to her followers. The police walked into frame while she was talking about her difficult mother-in-law. Her live stream captured the entire arrest. 30,000 viewers watched her get handcuffed while she screamed, "This is a mistake. She's senile." David was arrested at his office. His co-workers watched him being led away in handcuffs while Detective Santos read charges. conspiracy to commit murder, elder abuse, fraud, embezzlement. Marcus Webb, aka Dr. Peterson, was arrested trying to flee the state. They found him at the airport with a suitcase full of fake medical credentials and syringes. But the most satisfying arrest was Dr. Wilson, the real doctor who'd been falsifying medical records for Madison. He was arrested during a consultation with another elderly patient. The family thanked the police for stopping him before he could harm their mother, too. "Mrs. Thompson," Detective Santos told me, "your case has uncovered a conspiracy involving at least 6 other elderly victims." Madison and David hadn't just targeted me. They'd been running this scam for years, but I was the first victim who'd fought back with professional-level documentation. The children were taken for immediate medical evaluation. Blood tests confirmed sedative levels in all 5 kids. 9-year-old Jake tested positive for 3 different psychiatric medications. "These children have been systematically drugged for months," the pediatrician told Child Protective Services. "Possibly years. But instead of being placed in foster care, the judge granted me emergency custody." "Mrs. Thompson, your documentation proves that you're the only family member who is protecting these children. They're safer with you than anyone else." The children's transformation was immediate. Without the daily sedatives, Jake's natural intelligence returned within a week. He went from struggling with basic math to completing grade-appropriate work. Emma's personality emerged. Funny, creative, energetic. All the traits Madison had been suppressing with drugs. "Grandma Rose," Jake said on his first drug-free day, "I feel like my brain is working again." "Mine too, sweetheart." The children didn't understand the full scope of what their parents had done, but they understood they were safe now. And for the first time in 3 years, I was watching them because I wanted to, not because I was being exploited. Asset recovery was swift and devastating. Madison's social media accounts were seized, revealing income from exploiting the children and me. Her perfect family brand had been monetizing our suffering. David's accounts were frozen, uncovering additional stolen funds and forged documents. The $3 million trust fund was restored with interest and penalties. Madison and David's combined assets were seized to pay damages. But the real victory was discovering that Madison had been documenting her own crimes. She'd saved every text message, every email, every financial transaction. She'd kept records of the medications she'd been giving us, the fake medical reports, even video footage of her drugging the children's food. She'd been so confident in her plan that she'd created a perfect evidence trail of her own guilt. Within 48 hours, I'd gone from victim to vindicated, and my family had gone from predators to prisoners. What would you do if you discovered your family was slowly poisoning you? Real, recognize real, share below. The arraignment was set for the following Monday. I arrived with my evidence folder and 35 years of professional credibility. Judge Patricia Hernandez called the case, looked up at me, and froze. "Mrs. Thompson? Rose Thompson?" "Yes, Your Honor." "You taught my daughter Emma 15 years ago. Roosevelt Elementary, Special Education Program." The entire courtroom went silent. "Emma Hernandez. She had severe dyslexia and ADHD. You fought for her to get appropriate services when the district wanted to hold her back." I smiled. Emma. Beautiful girl. Brilliant mind that just worked differently. She's in college now, isn't she? Medical school, thanks to the foundation you helped build. Madison's attorney looked like he wanted to disappear. "Your Honor," he said weakly, "perhaps we should request a different judge due to this connection." Judge Hernandez stared him down. "Counselor, Mrs. Thompson taught hundreds of children over 35 years. Half the adults in this county probably had her as a teacher." She turned back to me. "Mrs. Thompson, I remember your dedication to documentation and advocacy. If you say you have evidence, I'm prepared to hear it." "Your Honor, I have 6 months of recordings, 63 pieces of physical evidence, and photographic recall of every crime committed against me and my grandchildren." Photographic recall? Occupational requirement, Your Honor. When you're tracking the progress of dozens of children with different learning needs, you develop perfect memory for details. Judge Hernandez nodded. I remember. You could recite Emma's entire IEP from memory during meetings. I looked at Madison, sitting at the defendant's table in orange jail clothes, and smiled. Still can. Emma's IEP goals from September 2010: improve reading comprehension from first grade level to age-appropriate third grade level through multisensory learning techniques. I recited Emma's entire educational plan from 15 years ago, word for word. The courtroom was dead silent. Judge Hernandez looked at Madison's attorney. Do you still question Mrs. Thompson's memory, counselor? Mrs. Thompson, please present your evidence. I stood up with my recording device. Your Honor, I'll begin with the defendant's confession to attempted murder. April 15th, 2:10 p.m., Madison to David. At these doses, we should see significant cognitive decline within 6 weeks. If not, Dr. Wilson says we can increase them until we get the effect we need. I played the crystal clear recording. Madison's voice filled the courtroom. What if she dies? David, she's 72. Old people die all the time. Heart failure from medication interactions. Very common. Madison's attorney jumped up. Your Honor, these recordings were made without consent. Counselor, in this state, recording conversations in your own home is legal. Proceed, Mrs. Thompson. March 22nd, 4:15 p.m. Theft confession. Madison's voice again. She'll never check the trust fund. By the time she realizes the $2.3 million is gone, we'll have her declared incompetent. Child endangerment evidence, Your Honor. Madison to unknown caller. The kids are getting too energetic for the videos. Can you increase the sedative dosage in their vitamins? Judge Hernandez's face darkened. They were drugging the children? 5 children under 10, Your Honor. Blood tests confirm months of systematic sedation for social media purposes. I presented lab results, medication analyses, and bank records. The defendants stole $2. $3 million from an educational trust fund using forged documents, attempted to murder me through medication overdose, and endangered 5 children through systematic drugging. Madison's attorney tried one last defense. Your Honor, Mrs. Thompson was allegedly suffering from dementia. Allegedly? Judge Hernandez looked at me. Mrs. Thompson, you've just presented the most organized, comprehensive, and professionally documented case I've seen in 20 years on the bench. She turned to Madison. Ms. Martinez, how do you plead? Madison stood up, shaking. Your Honor, everything she says is true. Her attorney grabbed her arm, but she shook him off. I drugged her. I stole the money. I was trying to have her declared incompetent so we could take everything. I never expected her to fight back, Madison continued, sobbing. She seemed so helpless, so easy to manipulate. Madison, stop talking, her attorney hissed. No, she has recordings of everything. She remembers every conversation word for word. There's no point in lying anymore. Madison turned to me, tears streaming down her face. How did you know? How did you remember everything so perfectly? I stood up. Madison, you forgot who I was. I'm not just a lonely grandmother. I'm a professional educator with 35 years of experience documenting abuse and advocating for vulnerable people. You made one critical mistake. You assumed that age equals helplessness. You thought retirement means incompetence. But my expertise didn't disappear when I stopped working. My memory didn't fail when I turned 70. And my professional obligation to protect children didn't end when I became their grandmother. Madison collapsed back into her chair. I want to confess to everything. All the other families we did this to. Mrs. Peterson, Mrs. Kim, Mrs. Johnson. We've been doing this for 3 years. Her attorney looked like he was having a heart attack. How many other families, Madison? Judge Hernandez asked. 12. maybe 15. I kept records of all of them. The courtroom erupted. Madison had just confessed to running a multifamily elder abuse operation. Judge Hernandez called for order. Madison Martinez, you've confessed to attempted murder, elder abuse, child endangerment, fraud, embezzlement, and conspiracy across multiple families. David Martinez, your participation in this conspiracy is equally serious. Normally, I would order pre-sentencing reports and delay judgment, but given the severity of these crimes and the confession of the defendants, I'm prepared to sentence immediately. Madison's attorney made one last attempt. Your Honor, my client is clearly having a breakdown. Counselor, your client just confessed to systematically abusing elderly people and children across multiple families. This court has a duty to protect the community. Judge Hernandez looked directly at Madison. Madison Martinez, I sentence you to 25 years in state prison for attempted murder, elder abuse, child endangerment, and fraud. Madison collapsed. David Martinez, 15 years for conspiracy, elder abuse, and fraud. My son stared at me with hatred and disbelief. Furthermore, this court awards Rose Thompson full custody of all 5 children, complete restitution of stolen funds plus punitive damages totaling $5 million, and recognition as a protected witness in ongoing investigations. Judge Hernandez turned to me. Mrs. Thompson, your documentation and courage have likely saved dozens of other potential victims. Thank you, Your Honor, but I was just protecting my family. No, Mrs. Thompson, you were protecting everyone's family. 6 months later, I sat in the same courtroom for a very different kind of hearing. Jake Thompson, reading at advanced 5th grade level. Emma Thompson, speech development normal for age. Lily Thompson, behavioral issues completely resolved. The children's progress reports were like watching flowers bloom after a long winter. Without the daily sedatives, their true personalities emerged. Jake wasn't learning disabled. He'd been drugged into cognitive impairment. Emma didn't have speech problems. The medications had been affecting her brain development. Grandma Rose, Jake said after his latest evaluation. Why did Mommy and Daddy try to hurt us? Sometimes people make very bad choices, sweetheart, but you're safe now. Will you always take care of us? I looked at my 5 grandchildren, bright, healthy, and finally free to be themselves. Always. But now I'm taking care of you because I love you, not because someone is forcing me to. Jake smiled. That feels different. Everything is different now. The children understood in their own way that their parents had done terrible things, but they also understood that sometimes the people who are supposed to protect you can become the people you need protection from. And they understood that I would always choose their safety over family loyalty. The financial vindication was complete. Madison's social media empire, built on exploiting me and the children, was liquidated. Every penny went toward restitution. David's assets, including the house they'd bought with my stolen money, were seized and sold. The $3 million trust fund was restored with interest, growing to $8 million. The court's punitive damages award of $5 million meant I'd gone from victim to millionaire through justice alone, but the money meant less than the principal. Mrs. Thompson, my attorney said, you could retire anywhere, live however you want. I'm already doing that. I'm raising my grandchildren in safety, with respect, and with boundaries. What about Madison and David's appeals? I smiled. Let them appeal. I have perfect documentation of everything. No appeals court will overturn a case this thoroughly proven. The money would secure the children's futures, college funds, medical care, whatever they needed. But the real victory was that they would grow up knowing that adults who hurt children face consequences, and that there are adults willing to fight for them, no matter what. My case became a model for elder abuse prevention nationwide. The Thompson Documentation Protocol, they called it. law enforcement agencies started training officers to recognize systematic elder abuse using my methods. I testified before Congress about gaps in the system that allow families to exploit elderly relatives. Senators, the problem isn't just individual bad actors. It's a system that assumes family members have good intentions and that aging equals diminished capacity. My case proves that expertise doesn't disappear with age, and that victims can be their own best advocates when given proper support. I started consulting with police departments, training social workers, and speaking at conferences about recognizing and documenting elder abuse. But the most meaningful recognition came from other victims. Mrs. Thompson, your case gave me courage to report my own family. Mrs. Thompson, I used your documentation methods to protect my mother. Mrs. Thompson, because of you, my grandmother is safe. That's why I'd fought, not just for myself and my grandchildren, but for every vulnerable person whose family sees them as an opportunity instead of a treasure. 2 years later, I'm sitting in my peaceful living room with my 5 grandchildren, healthy, happy, and safe. Jake is reading chapter books. Emma speaks clearly and confidently. Lily is thriving in kindergarten. Tyler excels at math, and little Mason is walking and talking perfectly. They call me Grandma Rose, and they know I will always protect them. What's the hardest lesson you had to learn about people? Sometimes the people you love most will try to destroy your mind to steal your money. But if you remember everything, document everything, and trust your professional instincts, you can destroy them instead. Subscribe for more stories where the good guys win and real justice isn't just a fantasy.